Princess Zarathel stood before the massive viewport of her flagship, watching the blue-green marble that humans called Earth slowly rotate beneath them. Her four arms were folded behind her back in the traditional pose of contemplation, while her silver eyes reflected the planet's surface. The Velkari Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past century, yet something about this small, insignificant planet made her feel uneasy. "Your Highness," came the voice of Commander Thexon, her military advisor. His scarred carapace gleamed under the ship's artificial lighting as he approached. "The human delegation has agreed to meet. They request safe passage to your vessel." Zarathel's elegant head turned slightly, her crystalline features catching the light. The Velkari were known throughout the galaxy for their beauty and grace, with translucent skin that seemed to glow from within. She was considered the most beautiful of her kind, with flowing silver hair that moved like liquid mercury and eyes that held the depth of ancient stars. "How peculiar," she mused, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "Most civilizations either surrender immediately or fight to the death. These humans wish to negotiate." "Indeed, Your Highness. Our intelligence reports suggest they are a relatively young species, only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their technology is primitive compared to ours." Zarathel nodded slowly. The Velkari Empire's policy was simple: offer lesser species the chance to join willingly or face conquest. In her 300 years of life, she had overseen dozens of such negotiations. They always ended the same way, with another world added to the Empire's collection. "What do we know of their military capabilities?" she asked, though the question was merely procedural. No species with such limited technology could pose any real threat. "Minimal, Your Highness. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles and primitive energy weapons. Their ships rely on basic fusion drives. They have no unified planetary government and spend considerable resources fighting amongst themselves." Commander Thexon paused, accessing his neural databank. "However, there is one unusual aspect to their military structure." "Oh?" Zarathel's interest was piqued slightly. "They seem to place great value on individual soldiers rather than collective might. Our scouts report that they have something called elite warriors who operate independently and are revered among their people." This was indeed strange. The Velkari, like most advanced civilizations, had moved beyond individual combat centuries ago. War was conducted through superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and strategic superiority. The concept of a single warrior making a significant difference seemed quaint, almost primitive. "How nostalgic," Zarathel commented. "Very well. Grant them safe passage. I am curious to see what manner of being these humans consider worthy of reverence." 3 hours later, Zarathel sat in her formal receiving chamber, a magnificent hall decorated with the finest materials from across the Empire. Crystalline formations from Theta Prime lined the walls, while flowing water features from the aquatic worlds of Nexus created a peaceful ambiance. Everything was designed to demonstrate the Empire's power and sophistication. Her court surrounded her, dozens of the Empire's finest minds, generals, diplomats, and advisors. All wore their most elaborate ceremonial garments, creating a display of wealth and culture that had intimidated countless alien delegations. "The human vessel approaches, Your Highness," announced the ship's AI in its melodious tone. Through the chamber's transparent dome ceiling, Zarathel could see a small, angular craft making its way toward their flagship. It was crude by Velkari standards, all harsh lines and functional design, with none of the flowing beauty that characterized advanced civilization's architecture. "Such an ugly little ship," murmured Lady Zenara, one of Zarathel's advisors. "Do they have no concept of aesthetic beauty?" "Apparently not," replied General Morthen, his deep voice carrying amusement. "Though I suppose we should not expect much from such a primitive species." As the human vessel docked, Zarathel felt a strange flutter in her chest. She had experienced this sensation only once before, during her first battle command as a young officer. It was anticipation, nervousness, impossible. She was Princess Zarathel of the Velkhari Empire, heir to 47 worlds, commander of fleets that could glass entire planets. What could a primitive human delegation possibly do to unsettle her? The chamber's main doors, massive constructs of polished metal and crystal, began to slowly open with a deep, harmonic tone. The human delegation would now walk the length of the chamber, a journey designed to overwhelm visitors with the Empire's grandeur while giving the princess time to observe and judge them. First came what appeared to be their diplomat, a middle-aged human female in formal attire, flanked by two others in similar dress. They walked with reasonable dignity, though Zarathel noted their obvious nervousness as they took in the chamber's magnificence. Standard behavior for a lesser species meeting their betters. But then came the fourth figure, and everything changed. He was tall by human standards, though still shorter than most Velkhari. His clothing was different from the others, some kind of military uniform, dark and functional. Unlike his companions, he showed no signs of being impressed or intimidated by the chamber's grandeur. His eyes swept the room not with wonder, but with the calculating gaze of someone assessing threats and tactical positions. Zarathel felt her breath catch slightly. There was something about his presence that seemed to fill the space around him. While the other humans walked carefully, almost timidly, he moved with fluid confidence. His posture was relaxed yet ready, like a predator at rest, but prepared to strike in an instant. "Your Highness," the lead diplomat began, her voice carrying a slight tremor as she performed what appeared to be their species' version of a bow. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Coalition. We thank you for granting us this audience." Zarathel nodded graciously, though her attention kept drifting to the warrior. "Ambassador Chen, welcome aboard the Eternal Dawn. I am Princess Zarathel of the Velkhari Empire. I trust you understand why we have come to your system." "We do, Your Highness. We come hoping to find a peaceful resolution that benefits both our peoples." "How refreshingly optimistic," Zarathel replied, allowing a hint of amusement to color her voice. "Though I fear you may not fully understand your position. The Velkhari Empire spans 47 star systems. Our technology is centuries beyond yours. Your resistance would be brief." She expected the humans to show more fear at this statement, but the warrior's expression didn't change at all. If anything, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth turn up in what might have been a smile. The audacity of it sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Your Highness," Ambassador Chen continued, "while we acknowledge the Empire's power, we believe there may be aspects of humanity that could prove valuable to your civilization." "Indeed, such as?" "Perhaps it would be better to demonstrate rather than explain," the ambassador said, glancing at her military companion. "If your Highness would permit, this is Colonel Marcus Kane, one of Earth's finest warriors. He has requested the honor of addressing you directly." Zarathel felt her heart rate increase slightly. No one had ever requested to address her directly. Diplomats begged for audiences, conquered leaders pleaded for mercy, but no one simply requested to speak as if they were equals. "Has he now?" she said, her voice carefully controlled. "How interesting. Very well, Colonel Kane. You may speak." The warrior stepped forward, and Zarathel noticed something that made her pulse quicken. Unlike every other being who had stood before her throne, he wasn't looking up at her with deference. His eyes met hers directly, level and steady. There was respect there, but not submission. It was the gaze of one professional acknowledging another. "Your Highness," he said, and his voice was deep, calm, utterly without fear. "I've come to make you an offer." The entire court fell silent. General Morthen's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Several advisors gasped audibly. No one made offers to Princess Zarathel. She made offers to them. But rather than anger, Zarathel felt a strange excitement building in her chest. For the first time in decades, someone was treating her as something other than an untouchable goddess. This human warrior was speaking to her as if she were an equal. "An offer?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the unexpected racing of her hearts. "Yes, ma'am. I propose a contest, single combat between myself and your finest warrior. If I win, you leave our system and never return. If I lose, humanity surrenders without resistance." The silence that followed was deafening. Zarathel could feel the shock radiating from her entire court. Such a proposal was beyond audacious. It was insane. A primitive human challenging the greatest military force in the galaxy to single combat? And yet, something about the way he stood there, completely calm and confident, made her wonder if perhaps there was more to these humans than their technology suggested. She found herself leaning forward slightly in her throne, studying this strange warrior who dared to meet her gaze. "You would stake your entire species on your personal skill in combat?" she asked. "I would. Even knowing that our warriors are faster, stronger, and have centuries of experience? I'm aware of the odds, Your Highness." Zarathel felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine curiosity mixed with a thrill of excitement. This human was either the bravest being she had ever encountered or the most foolish. Either way, he had managed to do something that armies and fleets had failed to accomplish. He had surprised her. "Colonel Kane," she said slowly, "you realize that what you propose is essentially suicide?" "Maybe, maybe not. Only one way to find out." His casual response to the prospect of death sent another unexpected shiver through her. She had commanded warriors for centuries, but she had never encountered someone who faced annihilation with such casual confidence. "Your Highness," General Morthen interrupted, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Surely you cannot be considering this absurd proposal. It would be beneath our dignity to engage in such primitive—" "General," Zarathel said quietly, and he immediately fell silent. Her eyes never left the human warrior's face. "Colonel Kane, why do you believe you could succeed where entire fleets would fail?" "Because, Your Highness, you've been fighting civilizations that think like you do, logical, calculated, bound by rules and traditions." His smile widened slightly. "Humans don't always think the same way as everyone else." Zarathel felt her breath catch again. There was something in his tone, in the way he carried himself, that suggested he knew something she didn't. The feeling was as unsettling as it was exhilarating. For 300 years, she had been the perfect princess, controlled, dignified, utterly composed in all situations. But something about this strange human warrior was making it very difficult to maintain that composure. She realized she was looking forward to seeing what he would do next. The combat arena aboard the Eternal Dawn was a marvel of Velkari engineering. The circular chamber stretched nearly 100 meters across, with walls of pure energy that could be adjusted to create different environments. Above, the transparent dome showed the star field beyond, while below, the floor was composed of adaptive matter that could become any terrain imaginable. Princess Zarathel sat in her viewing box, surrounded by her court, all of whom were still in shock over her decision to accept the humans' challenge. She had chosen her champion carefully, Kethvar the Undefeated, a warrior who had never lost a single combat in over 2 centuries of fighting. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws and reflexes that could track a photon beam, he was the perfect embodiment of Velkhari military superiority. And yet, as Zarathel watched the human warrior stretch and prepare in his corner of the arena, she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. Colonel Kane had removed his military jacket, revealing a simple cloth shirt that showed the lean muscle beneath. Compared to Kethavar's imposing bulk, the human looked almost fragile. "Your Highness," whispered Commander Thexon, "it's not too late to call this off. This human's death will accomplish nothing, and it seems wasteful." Zarathel's eyes never left the arena floor. "Wasteful or educational? I'm curious to see what makes this human so confident." "He must be insane, Your Highness. No rational being would face Kethavar willingly." But as Zarathel watched Kane move through what appeared to be some kind of preparation ritual, she wasn't so sure about his sanity. There was method in his movements, a calm precision that spoke of deep training and experience. More disturbing was the way he occasionally glanced up at her viewing box, offering that same steady, fearless gaze that had so unsettled her during their first meeting. The arena's AI announced the commencement of combat in its melodious tone. Champions prepared. "Environmental parameters set to standard. Combat may begin at your discretion, Your Highness." Zarathel leaned forward slightly. "Begin." Kethavar immediately launched into motion, his massive form moving with surprising grace across the arena floor. His 4 arms spread wide, claws extended, as he closed the distance to the human with speed that would blur the vision of most species. What happened next made Zarathel's breath catch in her throat. Rather than trying to dodge or retreat, Kane stepped directly toward the charging warrior. At the last possible second, he dropped low and rolled, but not in any direction that made tactical sense. Instead of rolling away from Kethavar's claws, he rolled between the warrior's legs, somehow ending up behind the massive alien before anyone could process what had happened. Kethavar spun with lightning reflexes, but Kane was already moving again, this time in a pattern that seemed almost like dancing. He weaved between the warrior's attacks with movements that were both impossible to predict and somehow perfectly timed. It was as if he could see the future, or as if Kethavar's lightning-fast strikes were moving in slow motion. "Impossible," breathed General Morthen. "No being can react that quickly. Kethavar is moving faster than the human nervous system should be able to process." But Zarathel was beginning to understand something that her general had missed. Kane wasn't reacting to Kethavar's attacks. He was predicting them. Somehow this human warrior was reading his opponent so well that he was already moving before the attacks began. The combat continued for several more minutes, with Kethavar growing increasingly frustrated as his claws found nothing but air. Kane had not yet launched a single offensive move, but he hadn't been touched either. He seemed content to simply dance around the increasingly angry warrior, occasionally offering what appeared to be an encouraging smile. "He's playing with him," Zarathel whispered, and the realization sent an unexpected thrill through her. No one played with Kethavar the Undefeated. No one had ever treated one of the Empire's greatest warriors as a source of amusement. Then Kane did something that made the entire court gasp in unison. In the middle of avoiding a particularly vicious series of claw strikes, he actually laughed. The sound echoed through the arena, rich and genuinely amused, as if he were enjoying the most delightful game. Kethavar's roar of rage shook the arena walls. He abandoned all technique and simply tried to overwhelm the human through pure aggression, his 4 arms becoming a blur of deadly motion. Kane's response was to suddenly change tactics entirely. Instead of dodging, he moved in close, so close that Kethavar's longer reach became a disadvantage. What followed was a display of combat technique that Zarathel had never seen before. The human seemed to turn Kethvar's own momentum against him. When the warrior swung high, Kane would duck and somehow use the motion to off-balance his opponent. When Kethvar tried to grab him, Kane would twist in ways that seemed to violate physics, turning potential captures into throws that sent the massive warrior stumbling. But the most disturbing part wasn't the technique, it was Kane's attitude. He fought like someone who was genuinely having fun. There was joy in his movements, an enthusiasm that was completely at odds with the life-and-death nature of the combat. "Your Highness," Lady Zanara whispered, her voice tight with confusion. "Is he enjoying this?" Zarathel found she couldn't respond. She was too focused on the way Kane moved, the way he seemed to find beauty in violence, art in conflict. It was completely alien to Velkari thinking, where combat was a necessary tool, but never something to be celebrated. Then the human did something that nearly made Zarathel stand up from her throne in shock. Kethvar had finally managed to corner Kane against one of the arena walls. With nowhere to dodge, the human should have been finished, but instead of showing fear or desperation, Kane looked directly up at Zarathel's viewing box and winked. Actually winked. In the middle of mortal combat, facing certain death, this impossible human had the audacity to flirt with her. What followed happened so quickly that even the arena's recording systems had difficulty tracking it. Kane somehow vaulted over Kethvar's attack, using the warrior's own head as a springboard, and landed behind him in a crouch. His movements flowed like water as he grabbed two of Kethvar's arms and did something with leverage and timing that sent the massive warrior flying across the arena to crash into the opposite wall. For the first time in over 2 centuries, Kethvar the Undefeated was on his back. But Kane didn't press his advantage. Instead, he stood up, brushed off his shirt, and waited for his opponent to recover. The gesture was so casually respectful, so confident, that it bordered on insulting. He was giving Kethvar time to recover not out of mercy, but because he didn't consider the warrior enough of a threat to finish quickly. Zarathel felt her hearts racing in a way they hadn't since her youth. This human was rewriting everything she thought she knew about combat, about strength, about what it meant to be a warrior. Her carefully maintained composure was beginning to crack as she watched him treat the Empire's greatest champion like a sparring partner. Kethvar rose slowly, his pride clearly wounded along with his body. He approached more cautiously now, finally beginning to treat the human as a real threat. But Kane seemed to sense this change and adjusted his own tactics accordingly. What followed was less a fight and more a lesson in applied physics and psychology. Every move Kethvar made was countered not just by technique, but by an understanding of how to use the warrior's own expectations against him. Kane would set up patterns only to break them at exactly the right moment. He would appear to be in trouble only to reveal it was a trap. Most disturbing of all, he would occasionally pause in the middle of combat to offer Kethvar what appeared to be genuine compliments on his technique. "Good form on that last strike," Kane called out after narrowly avoiding a claw that would have opened his throat. "Really felt the power behind it." The casual conversation in the middle of mortal combat was so unexpected that several of Zarathel's advisors actually started laughing before catching themselves. The idea of complimenting your opponent while fighting for your life was so absurd that it transcended shock and became almost comical. But Zarathel wasn't laughing. She was watching the way Kane moved, the way he thought, the way he turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. She was beginning to understand that this wasn't just superior fighting skill. This was a completely different way of approaching conflict itself. The end, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. Kethvar, frustrated beyond rational thought, committed fully to a devastating four-armed assault that should have torn the human apart. Instead, Kane simply wasn't there anymore. He had somehow slipped through the attack like smoke, and before anyone could process what had happened, Kethvar was unconscious on the arena floor. Kane hadn't knocked him out with a devastating blow or a complex technique. He had simply applied pressure to a specific point on the warrior's neck, a touch so gentle it looked more like a caress than an attack. As the arena fell silent, Kane looked around at the unconscious Kethvar with what appeared to be genuine concern. He knelt beside the fallen warrior, checked his pulse, and seemed satisfied that he was merely unconscious and not seriously injured. Then he looked up at Zarathel's viewing box again, and this time his expression was different. Gone was the playful confidence of combat. Now he looked humble, respectful, as if he understood the magnitude of what he had just accomplished and wanted to make sure she knew he took no joy in defeating a worthy opponent. "Your Highness," he called out, his voice carrying clearly through the arena. "Kethvar fought with great honor. I hope he will recover quickly." The concern for his opponent's welfare, coming immediately after a victory that should have been impossible, finally shattered what remained of Zarathel's composure. She found herself gripping the arms of her chair hard enough to leave marks in the metal, her breath coming in short gasps as she tried to process what she had just witnessed. This human hadn't just defeated her champion, he had redefined what victory meant. As the medical teams rushed to tend to Kethvar, and as her court sat in stunned silence trying to comprehend what they had just seen, Zarathel realized that Colonel Marcus Kane had accomplished something that no force in the galaxy had ever managed. He had made her question everything she thought she knew about power, about strength, and about what it truly meant to be a warrior. And despite her best efforts to maintain the dignity and composure expected of a Velkhari princess, she found herself desperately wanting to know what other impossible things this strange human might be capable of. The silence in Princess Zarathel's private chambers was absolute. For the first time in her 300 years of life, she had dismissed her entire court and requested to be alone with her thoughts. The ornate room, filled with treasures from across the galaxy, felt suffocating as she paced between the flowing water features and crystalline displays. 3 hours had passed since Colonel Kane's impossible victory, and she still couldn't process what she had witnessed. Kethvar had awakened with nothing more than a headache and wounded pride, confirming that the human had somehow rendered him unconscious without causing any real damage. The medical staff had been baffled by the technique, unable to understand how such a gentle touch could have been so effective. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. Zarathel composed herself, smoothing her silver hair and ensuring her expression showed nothing of the turmoil within. "Enter." To her surprise, it wasn't one of her advisors or court officials. Colonel Kane stepped through the doorway, still wearing the same simple clothes from the arena, though he had added his military jacket. He moved with that same fluid confidence she had observed during combat, but his expression was respectful, almost gentle. "Your Highness, I hope I'm not intruding. Ambassador Chen said you wished to speak with me privately." Zarathel felt her heart skip again. She had indeed requested a private audience, but now that he was here, she found herself uncertain of what to say. How did one address someone who had just shattered everything you believed about strength and power? "Colonel Kane," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Please, sit." He chose a simple chair near one of the water features, seeming to appreciate the peaceful sound. As he settled, Zarathel noticed he moved with the same awareness he had shown in combat, relaxed but ready, comfortable but alert to his surroundings. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said, taking her own seat across from him. "You have achieved the impossible." Kane's expression grew serious. "Your Highness, I want you to know that I take no pleasure in humiliating your champion. Kethvar is a skilled warrior, and he fought with honor. In a different situation, we might have been friends." This response caught her off guard. She had expected boasting, perhaps demands about their earlier agreement. Instead, He was showing genuine respect for a defeated opponent. "You speak of him as if he were your equal," she observed. "In many ways, he is. Skill, dedication, courage, these things don't depend on which species you belong to." Kane paused, studying her face. "I suspect that's not how your people usually view combat." Zarathel felt exposed under his steady gaze. "The Velkari Empire has always believed that superior technology and tactics determine victory. Individual prowess is less relevant in modern warfare." "Maybe. But your empire has been fighting civilizations that think the same way you do, logical opponents who follow predictable patterns." His slight smile returned. "Humans have a saying, sometimes the best defense is a good offense, but sometimes the best offense is doing something so unexpected that your opponent forgets they're in a fight. Is that what you did? Made Kethvar forget he was in combat?" "Partly. I also made him angry, frustrated, overconfident, and eventually curious. By the time he realized I wasn't following any rulebook he understood, it was too late." Kane leaned forward slightly. "Your Highness, may I speak freely?" The request was unnecessary. He had been speaking freely since the moment they met, but something in his tone suggested this would be different, more personal. "You may." "You're not what I expected when I heard about the Velkari princess. The reports described you as cold, calculating, untouchable. But during the fight, I saw something else." Zarathel felt a chill run through her. "What did you see?" "Curiosity. Excitement. When I winked at you, your composure slipped for just a moment, and I saw someone who was genuinely enjoying the unpredictability of it all." His voice became softer. "I think you've been playing a role for so long that you've almost forgotten who you really are underneath all the ceremony and expectation." The words hit her like a physical blow. For centuries, she had been the perfect princess, dignified, controlled, utterly composed in all situations. The idea that this human warrior could see through that facade so easily was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. "You presume a great deal, Colonel." "I do. It's one of humanity's worst habits." His smile widened. "That, and our tendency to make friends with people who are trying to conquer us." Despite herself, Zarathel felt a laugh escape. The sound surprised her. When was the last time she had laughed genuinely, without calculation or political purpose? "Colonel Kane, you realize that your victory puts me in an impossible position. I cannot simply withdraw the entire fleet based on the outcome of single combat. The Empire has protocols, expectations." "I understand. But maybe there's a middle ground." "What do you mean?" Kane was quiet for a moment, seemingly organizing his thoughts. "What if instead of conquest, you offered humanity something else? Partnership, cultural exchange. We're a young species, but we have perspectives that might be valuable to an empire that's been doing things the same way for centuries. What could humanity possibly offer that we don't already possess?" "The same thing I offered in that arena: unpredictability, fresh thinking, the ability to find solutions that no one else would consider." He gestured toward the viewport showing Earth below. "Your empire is vast and powerful, but it's also predictable. Every world you conquer adds resources and territory, but they all think like you do now. What if you added a species that thinks differently?" Zarathel found herself actually considering the proposal, which would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The Council of Nobles would never accept such an arrangement. Humans would be seen as primitives, unworthy of equal partnership. "Then don't make us equal partners. Make us something new. Cultural advisors, maybe. Strategic consultants. Give us a chance to prove that different thinking can be valuable, and let the results speak for themselves." As she listened to him, Zarathel realized that Kane was offering her something she hadn't experienced in decades: a genuine challenge. Not a threat to be eliminated, but an opportunity to grow. to learn, to become something more than she had been. You would trust your species' future to such an arrangement? I would trust it to you, he said simply. You could have had Kethvar kill me in the arena with a word. Instead, you honored the terms of single combat because you're curious about what makes humans different. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The directness of his faith in her was overwhelming. When had anyone last shown such confidence in her judgment rather than her title or power? There would be conditions, she heard herself saying. Humans would have to prove their value through action, not just words. And there would be those in the Empire who would see any arrangement as weakness. Let them. Sometimes the best way to show strength is to admit when someone else has something you need. Kane stood, moving to the viewport. Your Highness, in that arena, you saw something that made you question everything you thought you knew about combat. What if that was just the beginning? What if there are human approaches to science, art, philosophy, even governance that could teach the Empire new ways of thinking? Zarathel joined him at the viewport, looking down at the blue-green world that had produced this impossible warrior. It would be a significant risk. The best opportunities usually are. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. Zarathel found herself studying Kane's reflection in the transparent metal, noting the way he seemed completely at ease despite being in the heart of an alien fleet that could destroy his homeworld with a single command. "Colonel Kane," she said finally, "tell me honestly, when you proposed single combat, did you believe you would win?" His reflection smiled. "I believed I had a chance, but more than that, I believed that win or lose, I would learn something valuable about myself and about you." "And what did you learn?" "That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. That strength isn't about domination. It's about lifting others up. And that sometimes the most beautiful things in the universe are the ones that surprise you." The last comment made her breath catch. Was he referring to the combat? Or to something else entirely? "I have a confession to make," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I haven't felt this unsettled in decades. You've shown me that there are ways of thinking, ways of being, that I never considered. It's both frightening and exhilarating." "Good," Kane said softly. "Growth always feels like that at first." Zarathel made her decision. "I will propose a cultural exchange program to the Council. A small number of humans integrated into various aspects of imperial society, with the understanding that this is an experiment in expanding our perspectives. And if they refuse, then I will remind them that I am still heir to 47 worlds, and that sometimes wisdom requires accepting uncomfortable truths." She turned to face him directly. "But I have a condition of my own." "Name it." "You personally will serve as military advisor to my staff. I want to understand how humans approach strategy and tactics." Kane's expression became serious. "Your Highness, that would mean leaving Earth, possibly for years. My life, my career, everything I know is down there. I know what I'm asking. And I know it's not a small sacrifice." Zarathel felt her carefully maintained composure crack slightly as vulnerability leaked into her voice. "But you've shown me that there are still things in this universe that can surprise me, still ways to grow and change. I'm not ready to give that up." For a long moment, Kane studied her face with those steady eyes that had so unsettled her from their first meeting. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Your Highness, I think that might be the most interesting challenge anyone has ever offered me." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. But I have one condition of my own." Zarathel raised an eyebrow. "You're in a position to make demands?" "Not demands. Requests." His smile became gentle. "I want you to promise me that you won't forget what you felt watching that fight. That sense of wonder, of possibility, of discovering something unexpected. Don't let the protocols and expectations bury that part of yourself again. The request was so personal, so intimate, that Zarathel felt her heart's race again. And if I can't keep that promise, then I'll be there to remind you. That's what friends do. Friends. The concept was almost foreign to someone who had been surrounded by subjects, advisors, and courtiers her entire life. But as she looked at this impossible human warrior who had somehow seen through all her defenses to the person underneath, she found the idea deeply appealing. "Very well, Colonel Kane. It seems we have an arrangement." As they shook hands in the human fashion, Zarathel realized that she was no longer the same person who had watched Earth from her flagship just days earlier. This strange warrior had not conquered her world, but he had conquered something far more significant. He had conquered her certainty that she knew everything worth knowing about strength, about power, and about herself. For the first time in centuries, Princess Zarathel was genuinely looking forward to discovering what came next. And if her composure never quite recovered from the encounter, well, perhaps that wasn't such a terrible thing after all. Outside the viewport, Earth continued its eternal rotation, unaware that it had just fundamentally changed the future of both species through the actions of one impossible human who had dared to make friends with a princess of the stars.